Hey, it's Brett, and thank you for stopping by or returning to my channel. Today, I wanted to talk September wrap up. 13 books to go over with you. It was a fantastic month for me, and I can't wait to share with you the books. So let's go. All right, so a really interesting mix. Some of these were Booker Prize titles, others were things that I just wanted to read, and some things that I'd been reading for quite a while that I finally finished. Let me start with two books that were from the Booker list. Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood, which is on the short list, and I'm actually really excited about this because this was one of my favorite of the long list. It's a really beautiful story about a woman who leaves her home in Sydney to take up residence with a group of nuns. Um, I heard an author describe this as, adjacent to Lauren Groff's The Matrix. And I understand that. I will say if you have a phobia of rodents, mice in particular, this will be your undoing and you may want to skip it. However, I just found myself completely captivated in this kind of quiet, beautiful story, and it worked for me. It's one of these from the Booker list, much like Orbital, that is a very kind of cerebral, thoughtful, internal story. But and I loved Orbital as well, so clearly you could tell where my mind's been. The other one was This Strange Eventful History by Claire Massoud. I really liked a lot of this. It is an epic, multi-generational family story that's based on her real family's life. This is what I loved. It follows this family over a number of years, and it doesn't really leave you like starting with the parents and then they become the grandparents. You still follow those people through the course of the entire story. So you follow all of them, even as their children and grandchildren also come into the story. What I found a little distracting is it is a little long winded at times. I feel like some of the fat could have been trimmed off this just for momentum. But overall, I thought it was a totally solid novel. And if you're somebody who loves a good family story, then check this out. All right, next up was Someone Like Us by Dina Mengestu. This, and thank you to Knopf for this copy. This was a complete surprise to me. This is about a Ethiopian man who is living in Paris who returns to see his mother and his uncle in Washington. And when he arrives there, his uncle is dead. Now, his uncle is not really his uncle, it's what his mother always called him. And this is the guy that kind of raised him or was very much the father figure in his life. So he sets out on a road trip to find out what happened to this man. Samuel is the man who's died, his name. So it's a really interesting narrative that plays partially like a memory piece, but also a mystery. I don't really want to say too much about it. It's really stunning. That's what I'll say. Oscar, I almost said Oscar Wilde's The Wild. The Wilds by Lewis Baird about Oscar Wilde. If any of you had seen my Behind the Stack with Lewis Baird, then you'll know what this is about. It is the story of Oscar Wilde and his family, his wife and two children, which, hello, did not know that he had a wife and two children, but he did. So this is the events leading up to his gross indecency trial. But what Lewis Baird does that's so interesting with the narrative is he takes the book from the point of view of his wife. And it's really her story and then the children's story. So I really, really, really enjoy this. It's really quick, really smart. If you're a fan of Downton Abbey, you would really like this book. But if you're a fan of Oscar Wilde and any of his work, it's a really fun and interesting take on the story, and I really like this. All right, now something I have read I've been reading this for so long, and I was reading it with a group over on Instagram, and truly, I was leading the group. And full disclosure, I failed epically. I failed epically because I got behind on the reading, never really caught up. The group kind of fell apart. It was bad leadership on my part, which is Caledonian Road by Andrew O'Hagan. And I got this book because I was sure it was going to be on the Booker long list. And then it wasn't, and it didn't matter. And so I decided, well, I'm going to read it anyway with this group. So here are my thoughts. Ultimately, I liked this. It is very reminiscent to me of Tom Wolfe's Bonfire of the Vanities, and it's that kind of epicness. There is a certain Schadenfreude that takes place in this book of watching all these kind of elitist, privileged, very wealthy white people have their downfall. The downside to it is there's rarely a there's hardly one redeeming person in this story, and so it's a little bit of like watching a dogfight. That said, it's very engaging. It has an enormous cast of characters, so much so that there literally is a cast of characters. But you shouldn't be intimidated by that because it's really easy to follow. And a lot of these people are the kind of characters that in a movie are the last to go up on the crawl. There is a central story with, the kind of forefront. And in that forefront, it's this guy, Campbell Flynn, who's an art historian, professor, and feted fixture of the literati. And he's kind of the centerpiece of the book. So it's a chonker. I did ultimately enjoy it, and it's about class and privilege, and it's racism, and there's so many things being covered in this. The art world, it's a lot, but if you're up for it, I'd say go for it. It's not mentally challenging. It's not taxing. It's just big, and there's a lot of characters. Small Rain by Garth Greenwell. I loved this book. I loved this so much. I So the story behind this is a man goes into the emergency room with an incredible pain and goes through the experience of being in the hospital with a kind of severe heart condition that comes up. Now, this is apparently based on loosely an experience that Garth Greenwell had. I kept sitting there, and one of the things I kept doing was thinking, how much is loose and how much is actually real? Because there is such a specificity in this book, and it takes you through every single moment in that hospital. It is so well wrought. It is so detail oriented. And as this patient is in the hospital, he begins to think about moments of his life and when he met his partner. Um, there's various kind of snapshots of his life that come in and out. It's so beautiful. And it really is a book about facing death and remembering living and knowing what life is and remembering beautiful moments. And I don't know if some of this resonated with me in particular because, once you reach a point when you're kind of over the halfway mark, you start to think about all of these different elements of your life and about the people in your life. And that's really what this thing was. Uh, I thought it was just truly exquisite and was with it the whole time. It's not a fast paced book by any stretch of the imagination. And for anybody that's a hypochondriac, this will be your nightmare. But I'm kind of that person, but I thought it was amazing. Also, absolutely fantastic, amazing. There is a Rio Grande in Heaven by Ruben Reyes Jr., and thank you to Mariner for this copy. This is a series of short stories. A lot of them deal with immigration and identity. They're so creative. They're so ingenious, covering real issues, but incorporating things like AI. One of the stories in here, an immigration story, and one of my favorites in the book, is about a family that is immigrating to the US, but done as a choose your own adventure. I feel like it should be required reading for everybody to kind of understand what illegal immigration looks like. I thought it was just terrific, and I was so glad that I had this, and so glad that there were some friends of mine over on Instagram who were saying how terrific it is. So I thought I have to try this, and it's so under the radar right now. But if you're a short story lover, absolutely, absolutely get this. It's a phenomenal collection. Also, all right, so We Solved Murders by Richard Osman. I'm a huge Thursday Murder Club fan. So I was when I heard he was doing another book, I was like, really, really. So I got this on audio, and Nicola Walker, who's an actress, reads this. She's amazing. I mean, she's amazing. I've never heard anything that she's done before. She is incredible. Does I sound like I'm like 100? She does all the voices. She's really talented, but she does all the voices, and she's really talented. She's so funny and so dry and understands the rhythm of this, especially the dialogue. It's just sharp and crackling. I loved it. I loved it. I can't wait for the next book in this series. It's about a woman named Amy Wheeler who works in private security, and her father in law, who is a retired law enforcement agent who is widowed and lives in a small London town with his cat. She has been assigned to protect a very famous mystery writer who's somewhere between like Jackie Collins and I don't know. Like the joke in the book is that she might make more money than Lee Childs, but has raked in a ton of money, is smart and wickedly funny, and but there's someone trying to kill her. I'm not going to tell you anything else. It's great. And Rosie, who is the writer, is my favorite character. She is amazing. So I would say check this out if you want something that's completely fun and you like your mysteries to be a little lighter but really sharp. But get it on audio because get it any way you want to get it. But I'm telling you, the audio is the best. Okay. Two books by Abdi Nazemian. The first was Desert Echoes, which he was on my Behind the Stack. So if you listen to that, you'll know. First of all, it's been a while since I've read a young adult book, and going into these two books back to back really excited me about the genre again and why I used to love it so much and how much good stuff is actually being put out in the young adult world right now. This is about a young man named Cam who's involved with this older student named Ash, who they end up going out into Joshua Tree, and Ash disappears and is never found. So that's kind of the backstory for this, and it's present day, and this has been a huge part of his life, but so much of the book is the relationship between he and his best friend Brody. But there comes a point when he's going to have to face up with what happened in the past and kind of face that down. It was great. It was my first book that I read by Abdi. The second one, which is his really kind of really lauded book, is like a love story. And I thought this was just amazing, about three friends during the height of the AIDS crisis, young people living in New York, two guys and a girl. The girl happens to be in love with one of the guys. I listened to this on audio. Lauren Ambrose, who you might know from the show 6 Feet Under, reads the girl part in this. And she is so good. She's so good. It was a fantastic audio, but it's a really amazing story. It's such a timepiece about kind of the height of the AIDS crisis, the ACT UP movement. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. I'm coming up with no adjectives to say, but it's wonderful. So There were those two. Then Color Television by Danzy Senna. This thing is so wicked smart. Danzy Senna, as I've said before, is the wife of Percival Everett, who of course wrote James, but she is such a rock star. This is about a woman who is a writer who's kind of stalled out, living with her husband, who's an artist in Hollywood. They have two kids, they're really struggling. She decides to finish and finally finish this kind of massive book about the history of mulattoes. And her publisher comes back and her agent and says, this ain't it. Like, I'm sorry you wasted so much time. So she's kind of out of her mind to kind of cut through it. She ends up getting hooked in with a executive producer, and they are going to end up writing a series about a mulatto family and what happens. So it really skewers writers, Hollywood especially, the whole culture of Los Angeles. And it's unfortunately so right on the nose in every single facet. If I have a beef with this book, it's that living in Los Angeles, working with these people, meaning me, my job, it brought me down a little bit. It just bummed me out because, man, did I want to. It's cringeworthy at times, and it's really right on the nose in terms of the television business and how brutal it can be. So, but that's a me thing. I think if you're not in the business, or even if you are, you might absolutely love it. But I, you know, would I have felt the same if she was striving to be an investment banker? Maybe not. And it's a silly thing, but it is for me, just it was a thing. But still, a really, really good book. Then I read The Witches of El Paso by Luis Jaramillo. I will give you a blurb about this, which is coming out the second week of October. In 1943, El Paso, Texas, teenager Nena spends her days caring for the small children of her older sisters while longing for a life of freedom and adventure. The premonitions and fainting spells she's endured since childhood are getting worse, and Nena worries she'll end up like the scary old curandera down the street. Nena prays for help, and when the mysterious Sister Benedicta arrives late one night, Nena follows her across the borders of space and time. In colonial Mexico, Nena grows into her power, finding love and learning that magic always comes at a price. In the present day, Nena's grandniece, Marta, balances a struggling legal aid practice with motherhood and the care of the now 93-year-old Nena. When Marta agrees to help search for a daughter Nena left in the past, the two forge a fierce connection. Marta's own supernatural powers emerge, awakening her to new possibilities that threaten the life she has constructed. Really fun, really charming, great characters, great use of magic and what he does with magic, and a perfect book for spooky season. Would recommend. Then the last book from the National Book Award list, The Most by Jessica Anthony. I read this on the plane one night. I read this on the plane last night. It's only 130 pages, so this is a quick go. This is a portrait of a marriage. A woman one afternoon goes into the pool that's at their apartment building, and why and what precedes it is the story of she and her husband. It's fantastic. It is like this extended short story, effectively. And now I want to read like a big fat book by Jessica Anthony. It's so wonderful the way she unlayers this onion between the husband and wife and who they were and who they are and what led her to go into that pool and what happens. Great book. All right, guys, so that is the 13. Tell me of those what you've read, what you look forward to reading. I know Tuesday will be the shortlist for the National Book Awards for all of those of you who are reading that list. I've read about half the books. I'm going to see what ends up on the shortlist. And if there's stuff on the shortlist I haven't read, I might read it, but I'm not married to it. How's that? Thank you all for being here. Let me know below if there's these things, if there's any of these you liked, if there's any of these you read, if there's any of these you want to read. And I will see you all soon. Thanks.